the coordinator of assistive and instructional technology at the TTAC at Virginia Tech, and a former special ed teacher at the elementary level and ITRT at the high school level. So kind of have my foot in both worlds there with that, and bring that blended background along with serving students with disabilities today. So oh, I thought something pop up in the chat, but it's just Amber talking there. So I'll let her go ahead and talk to everybody on that. But that does remind me to say that we, again, know we're the last presentation of the day. So it would be a very big faux pas on our part to say, hold your questions to the end, because we know how that will go. So if you would like to put your questions in the chat box as we come along, or as the previous presenters said, just unmute and ask us. It won't hurt our feelings at all if you stop and interrupt us along the way as we're talking, because we know we're the finish line for today and we want you to still love us anyway. We'll give you a little bit of an agenda, some learning objectives that we're going to take a look at as we go through the class, the session with us today. And I do apologize up front. I have a little bit of a stuffy nose today. My voice is usually not quite this radio-esque. May need to go try out for the disc jockey role today, but if I get a little squeaky or need to stop for a drink, I'll beg your pardon in advance. But today's agenda, what we're going to take a look with you, but over the course of just short of the next hour, will be ways that you can include students with disabilities in your science classrooms, which I'm sure you're doing already. But Sharon and I are going to have some technology-based and universal design-based ideas to share with you that maybe you haven't seen before. We're going to explore specifically UDL in your environment and some AT tools that students may already be using in your classroom, or you may want to consider for them in supporting their different projects and labs and maker spaces and STEAM activities that you may be working through with them. We'll take a look at some of those specifically, and hopefully some are new to you. And we hope that some you've seen before too. And then we know in an hour, we can only cover so much topic and information in this area. So we want to link you to further resources. Sharon and I were talking before we were planning for this too. You're at the CTA right now. You're not likely going to take this information and run and implement it tomorrow. Maybe some of you are, but we wanted to be able to give you some resources that would take you into the next school year and over the course of the summer, so that you can do what you're doing now. Maybe it's some summer program, hopefully it's some time off too, but you'll be able to come back to it and implement it when you get to your classrooms again in August or September, when it is that you come back and begin. But for our starting point today, we wanted to show you some faces. Some of these faces might be familiar to you, and some of them might be unfamiliar to you. I'll be surprised if somebody knows who all of these folks are. I certainly didn't, but what I can tell you is that they are all scientists. And we would like if you would jump into the chat box and let us know who you see here. Oh, Temple Grandin.
Temple.
Hawking, yeah, Hawking, Temple Grandin, Hawking.
Yeah, two very familiar scientists.
Yeah, Hawking, a bunch of Big Bang Theory viewers too, right?
That's right.
Stephen Hawking. As you're going through there, yep, we see a lot of people with Stephen Hawking. Some people notice Temple Grandin too. Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and reveal for you. And Sharon, do you want to tell these guys a little bit about this?
Exactly. I think most of you knew who Stephen Hawking is, and we know him as a theoretical physicist. And I think I learned more about his theory of relativity and quantum mechanics from the Big Bang Theory. So he's an amazing man, with some physical disabilities and a degenerative disease. So they diagnosed his disease when he was in his 20s, and they did not expect him to live more than 14 months. So he is quite an amazing man. Temple Grandin, how many of you have seen Temple Grandin speak here in Richmond or somewhere in Virginia? She comes here, fairly often, and we get a chance to hear her talk. Temple Grandin is, yes, some people have seen her. She is an amazing woman, and she's an author, and she's also a speaker on animal behavior. So she's a professor of animal science at Colorado State University, and she invented this amazing corralling system for cattle to go through this corralling system to be loaded into, trucks and other corrals. So she loves to talk about cattle, and she is also a woman with autism. So when she talks a lot about autism, she gives a lot of speeches on autism. Did anybody know Caroline Solomon?
I didn't see anyone say anything about Caroline Solomon,
Oh,
Garrett, or Hindley Wedler.
right. Okay. Well, I'm glad someone saw the movie about Temple Grandin. That is an amazing movie. So Carolyn Solomon, she's an American academic whose teaching focuses on bringing deaf and hard of hearing students into the field of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. She's also an adult who is deaf. She has had an amazing career. Okay, Girat Vermeer. Matt and I kind of talked about how to pronounce that. I'm not sure.
I think you got it pretty close.
And yeah. Okay, we're getting some corrections here. Theory of relativity is Einstein, Hawking. Okay, quantum mechanics and the Big Bang Theory. So Girat is an evolutionary biologist who studies mollusks and shells. And he has revealed that he thinks that he is extremely sensory based in his learning. And he is a blind adult. And he thinks that he is, his sense of touch really has helped him to learn more about mollusks and shells. So that's amazing. And Henry Wedler is an American chemist and entrepreneur. He was born blind, and he's been advocated for greater accessibility of science for those with disabilities. He actually suggests that individuals with vision impaired chemists could have an advantage over sighted colleagues due to the need to mentally imagine the structure of organic compounds. So I think that's pretty amazing. And because we often don't teach our students about individuals and scientists and bring to light their disabilities that they have, they don't often see these individuals as role models and understand that I too can become a scientist. So, yeah,
I think that's a good point, Sharon. As in the group here of scientists, and I'll only honorarily put myself in there. Really, most of us only knew two of these folks to be able to talk about it at really any level of fame. But when we're talking about students with disabilities that are going through our classrooms in Virginia, there are about 164,000 of them in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So odds are about 13% of the students that you are serving in your classes or in your schools are being served under IDEA in one way or another. And having an idea about these sort of role models for students to point to believe that they can, achieve a lot in science is going to help with their self-determination and inspire them to really pursue this field. Oh yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. Very inspiring. I'm going to give you another number though, that is more related to the specific content of what we're talking about today. So the previous number was 164,000, right? The next number that I'm going to give you is 8,200. So 8,200 out of that 164,000 students, roughly, being served under IDEA with in those 13 categories of disability, have some sort of assistive technology documented in their IEP. And that's just roughly 5%. And those stronger in math than I am have told me in a way that makes it clearer to me that that's about 1 in 20 students that have an IEP that are being supported with assistive technology in some way. And I don't know about you, but I'm going to guess in scientists who are, more technology oriented. I think in general purposes, that really makes me feel like we're missing the boat with a lot of students here, that they are not having the opportunities to do this. And there's a few reasons why that we'll be able to get to. But before we dig into that, we want to lay the groundwork for everybody that's here to sort of have a baseline level of knowledge and understanding about what the concept and idea of assistive technology is, because it might be a new idea to you, or it might be something you've worked on for a while. But the U.S. Code, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, defines assistive technology as any item, piece of equipment, product system, whether acquired commercially off the shelf, modified, customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of a child with a disability. And that's a mouthful of words to be able to say that in the U.S. Code language. to really say it can be anything that can be used to support students with making progress towards their free and appropriate education and their IEP goals. So there you go, Stephen Hawking and our black holes and all of that there. There's an image for you to be able to put that in there. But in something so large as the universe, we have to find ways to package and kind of classify and categorize assistive technology tools that students are going to use at school. And the way that we've done that as assistive technology professionals and as educators is to create something known as the assistive technology continuum. And the assistive technology continuum just shows us that AT exists in low-tech tools, paper, pencil grips, raised line paper, graphic organizers, things like that are simple. There's no electronics, there's no chip in it, there's nothing like that. It's going to be very simple, likely cheap, take not a lot to replace it if it breaks or is disposable, not a lot of training to learn how to use it, etc. It kind of moves up the spectrum, as you can see here, to mid-tech items that, they may be electronic, something like a talking dictionary or word processor or a smart pen, not a sophisticated piece of equipment, but something that has a little bit more mechanics to it and working on that. And then high-tech tools, things that may have artificial intelligence behind it or sophisticated amounts of code behind it that would work like a word prediction software program to help students who may have dyslexia in your class get the words down on paper that they need to write their lab reports, to do the things that they need to do to meet the goals that they have. And in seeing that, you probably wonder why. Well, with so many good things that this can do and support students, why is it only 5%? Why are there only about 1 in 20 students with IEPs that are using these tools? And Sharon and I, over the course of time in working with different schools, have come up with a few different, we can anecdotally say, hypotheses, since it is, we're talking with science teachers here, and that we have seen evidence across schools of some different myths that we like to bust when it comes to assistive technology and students' use in the classroom, inclusive settings in particular. One of them is that assistive technology, I'll say it, is sometimes seen as a form of cheating or a benefit that a student has that's not really necessary. Everyone else is not getting it, so why should they have that? Okay, so definitely something that we look to bust. Another one is that assistive technology should only be considered for students with disabilities as a last resort. There's a way of thinking or kind of a concept out there that people have that if we're using AT with a student, then everything else has failed. We've tried different types of support, peer tutoring. We've tried having a paraprofessional work with them. We've had tried this different curriculum and this different intervention, and none of it has worked. So I guess we're going to start with the assistive technology at the end, and they don't look at that as a consideration possibly in the beginning. But the biggest overall factor that we feel behind the reason why there is so little AT being used by students with disabilities, not only in science classrooms, but in pre-K to 12 classrooms throughout all the public schools of Virginia and the United States, is that teachers just don't know about it. They don't know what it is. They don't know what would be appropriate for their student. They don't know what they would, be eligible for and the options that are out there. And that's what sessions like today intend to do, is to kind of fill in that gap. And we hope make a lot of traction in increasing that 5% to make it something a lot larger for folks to be able to dig into, because it's very impactful. We have a chart up here on the screen for you to be able to take a look at, because we'd like to just get a little bit of a feeling about you all and what you already know about AT as we get into the content of this lesson, so we know how far to go down which roles. So if you want to take the annotation tools on your screen, and you should be able to, if you hover over your bar, see annotate and make your mark either with the sticker or a drawing or something like that in the different categories here. And we'll give you just a second. I'm going to take a scratchy throat drink while you do this. And let's see how many of you have heard the term, how many of you want to learn more. You've used it some, And how many of you feel like you've used it extensively and are pretty savvy with it? So no judgment zone here. Go ahead and make an honest answer.
And if you can't find those annotation tools, you can go up to the very tippy top and hover over view options and use the down arrow to find annotate.
Awesome. We've got several answers to say they've heard about it. A lot of folks, we're seeing kind of that bell curve happening here. People in the middle say, I use some AT with students and want to learn more about how to use a variety of it. We've got one purple heart over on the right side to say that they select and use it extensively during science class and lab work. Who put that down there? We're going to call you out. Say hi in the chat box. Pauletta, was that you? Oh, Keeter, okay. Awesome. A classroom for students with multiple disabilities. I used to participate in one of those myself. So awesome. We would love to hear what you have to say about all of this as we go forward. So thanks everybody for making your mark in there. We're all around here. Oh, no annotations allowed on your site. Sorry about that, Eric. See if we can get that changed for in the future. But I'll go ahead and clear all the drawings here. And we're going to dig in. If I can get my screen to advance. Ooh, I got to close the annotation tools, I bet. There we go. And take the first step down the road of including students using AT in the science classroom. And there's two really primary ways that we want to discuss how you support doing this today. One of them is universal design for learning. I know we've all heard that term before. If you've been in teaching for very long at all, and even if you're just out of college, I'm sure that in your classrooms, you've heard it quite frequently as well, your teachers talking about that. But it's very common for teachers, even experienced ones, to think they know more about UDL than what they do. Even myself, I still learn something about UDL every day that I didn't know before. UDL is an overall design framework that we can use for designing our lessons, our labs, our activities to be as accessible for all of our students, regardless of disabilities, as much as possible. Is born sort of out of architecture and design in that respect, as far as having sliding doors on grocery store entries and curb cuts on sidewalks for individuals with mobility challenges, and taking the idea of making sidewalks and doors more universally accessible for everybody, not depending on their variability, and the different things that make them different, everybody from one another, and putting that into a learning environment as well. And then when that doesn't quite cover it for some students, then we move on to looking at specific AT tools and strategies that they may need to support them in the classroom if universally designing our activities and things we're working on isn't quite enough. And I would ask you, does that way of thinking seem familiar to you? Does it ring a bell, like VTSS or something like this, where we're talking about certain tiered level of supports? And it exactly fits into that. The idea of universally designing our lesson activities, our lab activities, and what we're doing in the classroom is good tier 1 instruction. And it's what all students was really going to benefit from this. And then those students who need a little bit more, moving up towards the tier 2 and especially the tier 3 level, that's when we get into AT and considering and assessing those students for that. Another thing to think about, there is a concept, and I probably should have put this back with the myths that we like to bust about assistive technology in this area, is that both specific assistive technology and instructional technology that's accessible for students, whether that's your Chromebooks that you're working with your students on, or if they have laptops and the features that are built into that make it allow them to have text read aloud on it. Whether that is just a nice thing to have, kind of a fringe benefit to being in class, isn't this kind of cool that we can do that? Or is this actually HLP? And I know that by looking at the schedule that you guys have participated in today, that you've been talking about HLPs already and probably will continue to do that over the course of the week here. So I don't want to miss out on plugging that using assistive and instructional technologies in your classroom is actually an HLP in special education. It's not just one of those nice things to have. There is evidence and research behind it that points to this being a very impactful way to support students with disabilities in your classroom. So if somebody asks you why you're so passionate about this, you can say, well, it's not just a nice to have. It's not just that nice DeLonghi Cafe Corso espresso machine that we have here making our coffee. It is nice to have, but it is also that Black & Decker Mr. Coffee workhorse coffee maker getting us done what we need to do. So when you want to apply an HLP, though, they're broad ideas, right? It can be really useful to have an actual framework or some steps. When I was in the classroom, I loved the checklist or some specific steps to follow for how I could go about taking theory and taking best practice ideas and making them practical in the classroom that I was working in. And Taylor, just recently here in 2020, has created a 6-step framework for, there's 5 arrows. I had to check myself to make sure there wasn't 5 steps, but there's 6 steps and 5 arrows. There's a 6-step framework for AT and including it in inclusive classrooms. And we're going to take you through this step by step. And again, you'll have this information to be able to review when you're back in your classroom and wanting to take a look at performing this with your students yourself. The first step in doing this, we'll jump right in. Again, a quick froggy throat break. Is to know the AT that is in your students' IEPs. Some data that I found recently says that just more than 33%, so more than a third of general ed teachers report referring to their students' IEPs less than once a month. And that could be a lot of reasons to that. Maybe in some students, the information is fairly digestible and you don't have to look at it that frequently. But reviewing these and having a good conceptual knowledge of what is in it, particularly when you have a student with complex supports like assistive technology in there, is really useful and essential. And even 6% of gen ed teachers reported that they only look at it when they receive it and when it's time for annual review. And something like that really opens the door for missing what is going on with the student when it comes to the accommodations and support that it's in there. So take a look at know what is in your student's IEP, not only what is listed, but what it actually is. And I wanted to show you a few things here that are going to be very common types of assistive technology that you're going to find with students in science classrooms. One of the first are graphic organizers. And in this list, you can see some that you have probably seen before. Inspiration has been around for a long time, has been used. I believe there's a subscription for certain levels of it now. A lot of these have a free tier and then paid versions with additional features that you will find in classrooms. But I also like to plug Google Drawings as something that is a free option for creating graphic organizers for students. If you have a student who has a graphic organizing piece of AT or accommodation in their IEP, and you happen to be a Google Workplace, I think they're calling it now, school division, Google Drawings can be a great place to create free graphic organizers for your students. Another common type you're likely to see are things like advanced organizers, different note-taking apps, think Notability and some things like that. Cloud-based note-taking apps, think Evernote, think Google Keep, and those options, and then things like smart pens and smart notebooks. A lot of these tools are not necessarily designed to be supports for individuals with disabilities. They're designed to be business and productivity efficiency tools that boost your ability to stay organized and to take notes and keep things together and improved and where you need to be able to find them. So if you have students that are struggling in this area, these links on this page, if they're using AT like this, you can click these and it's going to take you to more information on each one to review and build your knowledge of the AT that your students are using in your classroom. A third big type, and this was huge in the past year when students were working remotely and virtually and hybrid, were general reading and writing supports. Students who formerly received in-person read aloud services and supports like that while attending school in person, all of a sudden weren't able to have that when they're learning remotely and home during the pandemic. So I linked here a number of options for you to be able to review of text-to-speech tools that are apps and extensions that can be added to your Chromebooks, to your Windows PCs, things like Read and Write for Google, Snap and Read, options like that, and even word prediction tools like CoWriter that can support students with writing and filling in notes and the assignments that you give them. The bottom 3 links that are on this page, I want to highlight for you specifically before we move on, in that I always like to remind folks who, because there's always somebody who doesn't know this, and really any size group that I'm able to talk to, that there are a number of reading and writing supports that are built into the operating systems on the computers that you have, then that your students have, whether those are Chromebooks, whether those are Windows PCs. If you're fortunate enough to have Mac laptops in some classrooms, or I know there are a lot of tablets out there as well. And these links will take you to that information about how to activate and manage that software. And I'm so passionate about this that I want you to take a moment here. Again, scratchy throat cough break for just a second and take a look at the device that you are actually looking and attending the Zoom meeting with us on right now. Whether it's a Chromebook, a Windows PC, or a Mac or an iOS device, take a look and see if you can find the accessibility settings in the device you are currently on and looking at. If it's a Chromebook, go down and click the time in the lower right-hand corner. Then click Settings and Advanced and look for accessibility. If you're on a PC, use your search bar in the lower kind of left third, or ask Cortana to open your Ease of Access Center. And if you happen to be watching on a tablet or on an iPhone, go into your settings and check your accessibility stuff there too. And I would like just to hear from a few people in the chat box if you see something in there that you didn't know was there. Yep, students can find all sorts of ways to do things. And it is true that in some cases, there are school divisions that have settings blocked for folks to be able to get into accessibility features you might not be able to on your machine, depending on the permissions that are set on it. But I have found in many cases that having, again, a past in special ed and IT, I understand kind of both sides of where those groups are coming from, and that with some discussion in that relationship and understanding why a student may need individuals or creating a group of students, sometimes these features can be unlocked on Chromebooks and PCs. And Raven, yep, making the text bigger, that's nice, isn't it? I know my old eyes nowadays, I need things to be a lot brighter than I used to be able to check that out. But yeah, these tools are on your computers. Oh, voiceover, Lisa, don't get me started. It's great, but just walk out if it gets stuck in the on position on your computer. I should have said that if you accidentally look at your accessibility features, try them out, but avoid voiceover if you're on that on Apple. There are, and then Chromebox if you're on a Chromebook as well, because if those get turned on, they're very keyboard command ready, and they need to it can be difficult to turn off if you don't know how, and your computer will talk to you for a while. Yeah, magnifiers are on there. There's a lot of things that are built in that are right there that your students can use to make things more beneficial. Oh, I like the hearts on the screen too. I didn't even ask for that. I got 3 hearts. What do you think of that, Sharon? Sadly, have to clear them off now to move on to the next screen. A couple more things that I think you'll see frequently in science classes that you'll need to know more about. Types of AT communication. You may have some students, and a lot of the AT that we're talking about today are going to be more often used for students with high incidence disabilities than those with more low incidence disabilities. Those are sort of specific though, and we wanted to try to cast a wide net with what we're making you familiar with today to be able to impact the largest number of students possible. But There are many students with communication needs that will come through your classroom. They may use a device or something like that. But in using something like this, where you're taking the text of a text-based laboratory activity, what are we working on here? Oh, observing the chemical change of making a baggie blow up, right? That sounds like fun to me. And moving that from being a text-based direction activity to one that is symbol-based using BoardMaker software. BoardMaker is not free, although you can get a free trial for doing that. But there are a number of different symbol generating tools out there. And again, the link in the lower left-hand corner here will take you to that. And you can create some of these for your students as well, which can be beneficial not only for students with reading or communication disabilities, but also for students where English might not be their first language as well. Using these picture supports can be very beneficial. And then I didn't want to get away without talking about some science-specific AT for you guys. Things like the pictured switch adapted pouring cups, that we actually have these in our TTAC lending libraries too, if you would like to borrow something like this. And then items like talking thermometers and tactile marked measuring tools that can be purchased or created too. If you have a ruler or a meter stick that you're using to measure in class, using something like a wiki stick to mark the inches or the centimeters on there, so a student can feel the distances and the lengths that they're measuring. And then options to make things virtual, like a microscope and dissection, options which you probably are very familiar with for students that, you know, for one reason or another are not wanting to be involved in frog dissection or something like that. And there's a plethora of different apps that are out there to be able to do that. But this is beneficial for students with different disabilities as well. Oh, we've got a heart on there as well. And then that bottom link there is just a big list for you all of accessible science equipment that we researched and found some different options. Too many to list on here. So we just wanted to link you to being able to do that. But I did want to show you, and I don't think I'm gonna have to stop my share. I'm gonna do a Zoom for faux pas here right quick and stop and then share again, because I don't think I clicked the share sound on this, but I want to show you this virtual dissection example here of a frog. And again, it's not so much about the virtual dissection app here, because I know you're all aware that these exist, but I want to show you this and then tell you something about iPad Assistive Touch. So that is an app called Froggypedia that allows for some augmented reality virtual dissection of a frog, right? And doing that, again, probably not something that's too new to you. But what might be too new to you is the idea of pairing that with using assistive touch on your iPad. So if you have a student that has a physical disability or visual impairment, and they can't, oh, Sharon can smell the chemicals while we're doing that. Yeah, that smell never really leaves you, no matter how many years it is. But if you have a student with motoric difficulties that would not allow them to use a scalpel, forceps, anything like that for doing this, and even may not have the ability to isolate a finger to go in there and identify the frog's heart to move it out into the tray or something like that. Using assistive touch tools, you can actually customize the gestures on their iPad so that they could tap 3 times on the upper left-hand corner of the iPad to make a certain command happen, to make a swipe or a grab or something like that. You can connect external switches for students to be able to perform these fine motor skills. So really some amazing things that can be done with assistive touch through this when you're using something like a virtual dissection app, that sort of layering the supports for your students in the classroom. And we don't want to watch it again, as cool as it was. And then the last but not least thing I want to share with you from kind of the assistive technology pool here is the idea of captioning your videos. Again, something that came up big this past year with students working remotely. And I have this really great song for us all. And I'm going to play it. It's the updated periodic table song. I know that you all are going to love it. So I'm going to go ahead and play it.
We don't hear it.
Volume. Rachel called me. You got it. I got you. So if you are a student with a hearing impairment and you have this on your Google page, your Google Classroom page and play it, this is what you're experiencing, right? This is what you're experiencing. I got you. And everybody jumped up right away and was like, you muted it. I can't hear it, right? It was doing that. So if I come over here and click captions, you can at least, you're not going to get the ditty that goes along with it, but you can see the words that they're singing or saying as they go along with it. How important captions are, not only for students with hearing impairments, but for people that may be at home and they're there with their 4 other brothers and sisters, all doing remote school work, and it's loud. They're all at the kitchen table. Things are banging around. Mom or dad is cooking in the kitchen. The cat's meowing, the dog's barking. It's beneficial for everybody to be able to do that, right? So I got you on that. I even got you, Amber, on that one. So good demonstration on my point, but I couldn't not let you not hear it.
Lanthanum, Cerium, and Praseodymium.
Oh, it's got to pick up here in just a minute.
To Promethium, then 62. Samarium, Europium, Gadolinium, Interbium, Dysprosium, Holmium, Erbium, Thulium, Ytterbium, Lutetium.
All right. If you want to hear more of it, you'll have to go and look at the presentation again later. It really is amazing as it goes through the noble gases and everything that's in there. All right, ASAP Science to go through it. And then the last kind of section that I want to talk about before I turn it over to Sharon is step 2. Step 1 was the longest by far because it's about knowing what your students are using, right? So step 2 is very small and it is just about evaluating it. Once you know what your student is using and what it is supposed to do, you can evaluate in your class. Are they using it independently, that software program or that support to be able to participate and complete the activities that you're giving them? And are there barriers for them? Are there barriers for you that still need to be overcome in doing that? And I would just suggest to my many science teacher friends that are out there, I am a novice 3D printer myself. I like to do this. If you have STEM areas, you have a 3D printer, you have students that are looking to create with that, and they would like to trial ways to do it. Making assistive technology with 3D printing is an amazing thing to do. And these organizations like 18makers.org and Makers Making Change that you can find online have lists of assistive technology needs that you can identify, create, and then send to people to do that as a community project. So take a look at those if you're interested. And I'm going to take a big drink and turn it over to Sharon to talk about steps 3, 4, and 5.
All righty. So thanks, Matt. And wow, you showed a lot of great stuff. And there were lots of good comments in the chat window about things that people were already familiar with or some new tools. So thank you. Thank you for that, Matt. We're going to talk a little bit about UDL and those steps 3, 4, and 5 of the 6-step process there. There we go. Okay, so much as you did before, if you can take a minute to pull up your annotation tools and tell us a little bit about where you fall in terms of UDL, Universal Design for Learning. Where do you fall? Have you heard of the term and know a little bit? Oh my goodness, we use it regularly. That's great. Another big heart there. Moderately familiar, yeah. Want to learn more? We love that. If you can't use your your tools, you can put yours in the chat window. Yes, Universal Design for Learning. Well, we're going to take a minute just to get all on the same page and watch this very quick little video about UDL. Looks like most people kind of fall in the middle. That is great. Thanks for your contributions there. And Matt, I didn't get any hearts down at the bottom yet. Oh no, what can you say? Yes, moderately familiar. That's great. Okay, Matt. All righty, so here's this quick little movie. It's about 4 minutes. Sit back, grab your snacks and your drinks, and listen up. Matt, I'll let you know if we can't hear it, if it needs to be turned up a little bit.
This teacher needs to meet a curriculum goal, and she's got a very diverse group of students. And so does this teacher. And this one. Most do. In fact, research shows that the way people learn is as unique as their fingerprints. What does this mean for teachers of today? Classrooms are highly diverse, and curriculum needs to be designed from the start to meet this diversity. Universal design for learning is an approach to curriculum that minimizes barriers and maximizes learning for all students. Whoa, that's a fancy term. Universal design for learning. Let's unpack it a bit. Let's think about the word universal. By universal, we mean curriculum that can be used and understood by everyone. Each learner in a classroom brings her own background, strengths, needs, and interests. Curriculum should provide genuine learning opportunities for each and every student. Now let's think about the word learning. Learning is not one thing. Neuroscience tells us that our brains have three broad networks. One for recognition, the what of learning, one for skills and strategies, the how of learning, and one for caring and prioritizing, the why of learning. Students need to gain knowledge, skills, and enthusiasm for learning, and a curriculum needs to help them do all three. But every learner is unique, and one size does not fit all. So how do we make a curriculum that challenges and engages diverse learners? This is where the word design comes in. A universally designed building is planned to be flexible and to accommodate all kinds of users, with and without disabilities. It turns out that if you design for those in the margins, your building works better for everyone. Curb cuts and ramps are used by people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, and people on bikes. Captioning on TV serves people who are deaf, people learning English, people in gyms, and spouses who get to sleep at different times. UDL takes this idea and applies it to the design of flexible curriculum. UDL goes beyond access because we need to build in support and challenge. So how do we use the UDL framework to make learning goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone? First, ask yourself, what is my goal? What do I want my students to know, do, and care about? Then ask, what barriers in the classroom might interfere with my diverse students reaching these goals? To eliminate the barriers, use the 3 UDL principles to create flexible paths to learning so that each student can progress. Number 1, provide multiple means of representation. Present content and information in multiple media and provide varied supports. Use graphics and animation, highlight the critical features, activate background knowledge, and support vocabulary so that students can acquire the knowledge being taught. Number 2, provide multiple means of action and expression. Give students plenty of options for expressing what they know and provide models, feedback, and supports for their different levels of proficiency. Number 3, provide multiple means of engagement. What fires up one student won't fire up another. Give students choices to fuel their interests and autonomy. Help them risk mistakes and learn from them. If they love learning, they will persist through challenges. And remember, always keep in mind the learning goal. Get rid of barriers caused by the curriculum and keep the challenge where it belongs. And that's it. Okay, quick recap. Show the information in different ways, allow your students to approach learning tasks and demonstrate what they know in different ways, and offer options that engage students and keep their interest. Universal design for learning equals learning opportunities for all. For more information on UDL, go to www.cast.org.
All righty, thank you, Matt. I hope you learned a little bit more about UDL if you didn't know much at the beginning, and maybe it was a good refresher for those who, oops, here we go. a good refresher for others. So CAST, the Center for Applied Special Technology, as it was originally called, is now the home of all of this UDL information. And there are many, many, many resources that are available on the site. And it takes a lot of time really to, to dig deep and think about the planning piece that's involved in UDL. I think when we first learned that term universal design for learning many years ago, actually, it was like, oh, I'm a special ed teacher. I can really do this. I can come up with accommodations and modifications all day long. But really it's the planning piece, the advanced planning that's important, especially for, co-teachers together to look at this and really use these tools when you're designing instruction for all of your, varied learners these days. I mean, lots of learner variabilities. So this is just another resource here. You can see on CAST website, and it's cast.org, that there are lots of free learning tools there to help you learn even more about this. Matt, if you'll move on to. So how many of you have seen this little chart here, this graphic organizer for UDL? Anybody seen this before? Should look kind of familiar. It looks a little different than the original version did because they've added all of these links and checkpoints to the to each of these areas. So you can see we've got multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. And so you could go to the cast.org website and look for guidelines for UDL, and you will find this this resource here for you. Wish we could.
You got some hearts on that one, Sharon. There.
Yeah. Okay, good. All righty. And so I love also Matt has this arrow pointing to optimizing access to tools and assistive technologies. So good. All righty. This is another really nice planning tool. And as I mentioned before, it's all about the planning piece. And this would be a great one for co-teachers to look at together when you're designing your science activities or important content that you want to cover. There's a step 1, which is proactively designing your lessons. And it looks at engagement and representation and action and expression. And Matt, you can move on to the next slide. There we go. There we go. And then 2 is implementation, and step 3 is the reflection, much like that 6-step process, Matt, that you had shown before. So this is a really great resource. You can find this resource on Understood for All, which is understood.org, and you can print that off or use it digitally. And it's a really great planning tool there.
We have some people saying they love this tool in the chat box, and they haven't seen it in this format before.
Oh, good. Oh, that's really great to see. Yeah, it's really easy, easy to read, easy to fill in, and lots of really good probing questions for planning. So, Matt, if you want to move on to the next one too. Okay, so we like this one too. This is developed by Do It, and it's making science labs accessible to students with disabilities. And I printed this off. It's 12 pages if you want to print it off. And there are long lists of ideas and resources for lots of different disability types, and their list of accommodations here. So this is another really good resource for you to look at as you are designing for universal design for learning. Okay, and then we like this one too. It's another good STEM for all. It was developed by the Center for Technology and Disabilities. That's kind of it's a site that has been it's no longer funded, but it has lots and lots of resources and webinars there. So you may want to still go to ctdinstitute.org for all these great resources here. So, oh, good. Thanks for putting the link in there for the understood.org. It's great, but we like this. Matt, did you want to comment on that one at all?
Which one?
The previous slide. I know that was
the previous slide. Let me see if I can go back here. Oh, phooey. I messed up.
We can move on.
I've messed up. Go ahead.
Okay, that's all right. So by implementing UDL, who will I impact? And Matt, there we go. Oh, Matt, we got to go back. Sorry. One more.
Did we miss one?
Yeah, we did.
Sorry about that. Let me go back here.
There we go. Yeah.
I was answering questions in the chat box, and
Oh, fingers got
I only have so many fingers.
Okay. All right. So just for a few minutes here, we want you to think about what are your favorite science experiments or science lab activities? And by, your favorite, I mean, which ones did you get the biggest bang for your buck? Which ones did your kids really meet their learning goals? Which ones were your kids, really, really interactive and engaged and talking and all of that? Which one? Do you have some favorite science experiments? Maybe it's the egg drop. Is that too young for you guys? Or how charcoal purifies water. Okay, you can chat them in the chat window too if you like.
Preparation of hydrogen.
Uh-huh.
I know hydrogen's been around for a long time, but I don't remember that one.
Okay, there we go. You could use an upper bell back to demonstrate pressure. Oh, this is stuff above my head, above my level of understanding. But anyway, when you think about those lab experiences, I want you to sort of close your eyes and think about what does it feel like in that room when your kids are engaged, is there a lot of maybe there are bright lights from the fluorescent lights ahead. Are there loud noises from kids kind of talking to each other and getting excited about what they're seeing and what they're doing? Is there a teacher maybe in the classroom that's, maybe using a high voice to talk to people on the other side of the room? What does it feel like? Is there a lot of movement? Yeah, all kinds. I'm looking at the checks. There's lots of things coming up here on the screen here, Oh, got some more ideas there. Well, I think if you think about the way that science lab looks and feels to our students, that maybe our students with autism or our students with more sensory needs, or those that have attention needs, and they're moving around, a great deal on their own anyway, could that be an overwhelming environment for those kids to be in? And if so, what are some of the things that we could do to plan ahead to accommodate for all of your students' sensory needs? Any thoughts on that? What might help them accommodate for some of those sensory experiences in the classroom? I was thinking about, maybe having smaller groups working together, headphones, absolutely.
Yeah, Sierra said osmosis, but I don't think she meant that as a sensory activity. Maybe.
Okay, maybe. But I love this one from Claire. When you get to know your students, you can group them so each one's strengths can shine through. Yeah, so if you have partners that are working together to sort of build on each other's strengths. The question was, what can you do to reduce some of the sensory stimulation that goes on in a science lab for your students? Yeah. All right. And I love the headphones one. I think that really hits the nail on the head. Maybe turn down some of the lights, use incandescent lighting, all kinds of little strategies that you can use to kind of make it a soft learning environment to meet your needs of your kids. Now, let's look at these 3 areas of UDL: multiple means of engagement, representation, and action. Did you hear anything from Matt's ideas with assistive technology, or can you think of any other strategies that you would like to use or are using already in your science labs? And you can use the annotation tools and the text tool there, that if you want to type something in or give us some ideas, or you can just put them in the chat window. Let's give you about a minute on that one. Thank you, Matt. Someone suggested stations earlier for that environmental design. Okay. Might take a little time to give some thought to that. And we don't want to take up too much time. Oh, captioning videos. Yes, indeed. That's a great strategy there. Something easy enough to do with Google Slides or, your videos. Yeah. Have to plan ahead. So that's the planning piece that comes into it. I'm thinking about, sort of the engagement strategies of offering many choices and offering some autonomy in what they might want to do first or next or last. Thinking about timers. I have one here in front of me. This little time timer is a great, visual support to put into your classroom. But yeah, just give some thought to that. We're not going to spend any more time on that because we want to allow a minute to sort of wrap up here. But thank you for participating and adding your comments there. So Matt, want to move on to the next slide? All righty. So 13% of the population have disabilities. I think Matt mentioned that already. And IEPs address their specific needs. But by implementing UDL, you can impact 100% of your students. So I just wanted you to sort of think about that with UDL and how you can really, plan to accommodate needs of all of your students. And I like this comment from Claire about laboratory safety standards. So yes, you can't use, but if both ears are covered, they may not be able to hear the teacher. So we have to think about those things too. Thank you for adding that. Matt?
As we wrap up here in the last few minutes that we have, guys, we don't want to forget to take time to reflect on what we talked about today, and on your lessons about what worked and what didn't, especially when you're working with the co-teacher, like you all are in the areas of AT and UDL. This is a step that I know when I was in the classroom and I still skip an awful lot that I wish that I didn't, because revising your instruction based upon feedback is a big part of what's going to make it better in the future, right? Being able to correct and make it better for the next class. This is a sample of reflection questions. Again, a document you guys can click on in this to use to go through the reflections that you may have, and for what you've done at the beginning of the lesson, what happened during, after, and then sort of your open response at the end to make corrections and improvements as you and your co-teacher work together to improve your instruction in the future. And we know kind of the last thing we want to leave you with is that technology, there's a lot of it out there. There's a lot of choices. Specific technology for supporting students with disabilities it's an ocean of options. And if you need help with that, you may have an assistive technology team in your school division. But if you don't hesitate to reach out to the AT network members in the TTACs in your regions, and we can help you out in that area. Also, in your resource folder for this, and the link right here is a link to UDL and AT Playground website we've created for a lot of the summer academies this year. And you can find a lot of the tools that we talked about today and ongoing resources so that you can actually put your hands on these tools and play with them and learn how they work. And knowing that you won't be, some of you may not be back to the classroom for a while, this is a resource you can use when you get back, as is the VA Assistive Technology Resource Guide. Thank you, Amber, for dropping that in there. And then the wrap-up resources that we have here for you that you can click on, including resources from the National Science Teachers Association and a few of the documents we mentioned earlier. And I saw Dr. Lee turn her camera on, so that means our time is up.
Wow, what an awesome presentation with lots of information. Matt, Sharon, you're always excellent. Thanks for sharing so many good resources with our teachers. What I want to do now